I have not asked for a second yet. I made the motion.
Are we allowed to talk about the amendment before we have a second?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I think I like the amendment, but do we want to provide at least something about the procedure requiring a minimum number of people to be part of the review? So it's not just one. I mean, the way it's written, it's just superintendent creates a procedure. Superintendent can say, I am going to be the review committee. I'm not saying you would do this necessarily, but you know, it allows for one person to be that.
It allows for checks and balances.
Yeah, I mean, we need to have more than one person as part of the review so that we've got the checks and balances in place. So maybe,
I'm comfortable with the plural designees. That is clear that it would be more than just one person.
but that's for final review.
I see what you're saying.
So earlier.
Right.
Yeah, so the superintendent shall create a procedure for review of library materials by a committee of not less than.
Okay, understood.
Does that put us right back where we were?
Yes.
I understand and don't totally disagree, but I don't want to go backwards.
Right.
And we are supposed to stay, this is policy, not procedure. Dr. Robinson can come up with that procedure.
All right.
Yes.
Do I have a second? As,
To strike out the last paragraph and insert the,
and insert this, yes, I have a second.
read it one more time, please.
The superintendent shall create a procedure for review of library materials in the event that a complaint is made, taking into consideration the guidelines set forth in this policy as part of the procedure. Any decision made regarding material reconsideration shall be subject to final review by the superintendent or his or her designees.
I'll second the amendment.
Just a point of discussion, to be clear, this would then eliminate the possibility that a challenge or a question could be raised and that book immediately comes off the shelf for any other purpose other than to review it. I mean, it doesn't come down and just stay hidden away. It's still available.
This does not
Address that.
put any address, it does not address that, yeah. It removes the part that says there's going to have to be a pre-authorization for everyone to use that book. And so that would be more, in my opinion, a procedural thing. Yeah, I think that we, as a board, could tell Dr. Robinson our
Yeah, I would like to
thoughts
make
on
sure
that.
that doesn't happen.
that the books stay on the shelf.
Well, I know it's reasonable. I mean, Mr. Gilbert said there's 33,000 books. Obviously, we can't read 33,000 books either, even though we are the final, arbiters of what should be on the shelf. There's no way for us to be aware of what's in 33,000 books. And so, yeah, I understand that books have to come off to be a part of the review process. I'm not comfortable with the idea that they just come off and stay hidden away, not hidden away, but stay off the shelves.
Out of circulation.
Out of circulation, thank you, until they've had a chance to be fairly reviewed, decision made, and then they go where they should go, I guess is what I'm saying.
Is there a way to make a complaint form when it gets filed with the reason just available somewhere to where if parents are concerned, they can see what's been, brought up as a concern and maybe restrict that for their own child if they so choose to or not?
So a concern being raised could be made public? Is that something that,
I mean, just.
You guys are talking procedure here, right? So
Right.
this is not policy,
Right,
so
you're right.
we need to get back to policy.
right?
Yeah.
I think that we can express those thoughts to Dr. Robinson as but yes, that would be more a procedural.
Right.
It's a great suggestion, but it's a
Yeah,
procedural.
I didn't mean to
Yeah.
shut you down, just didn't want to give false.
Procedural point. So I
Call for
have,
the question.
good, thank you. So we'll end discussion and we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the amendment as presented to the last paragraph. Please raise your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Seeing none, the amendment passes unanimously. Now we're back to the original motion on the table, which is this policy
As amended.
as amended, so that with this final paragraph. Do we have other discussion in regard to this policy as this would be the first amendment?
Okay, so I'm still confused as to how, you pointed me to IGDBA, where it clearly has guidelines that's, however, students cannot distribute expressions which are pervasive, indecent, or vulgar, contain any indecent or vulgar language. How do we govern that? How do we dictate that? I mean, who decides what that language is?
I think we allow professional staff to make judgments all the time. So, I would say that's a procedural thing, and we constantly allow staff to make judgments of character judgments and all kinds of decisions like that. So we hire professional staff
And that applies to unofficial material.
this
students are distributing.
the IGDBA is unofficial material, correct? So that's where that language came from, that got brought over here.
I move we amend the policy IIAC-R1 by striking out item number 1 under restriction by grade and age.
I have a motion to amend to strike number 1 under restrictions completely. Is that your motion?
That is correct, because it's defined in the statute.
This talks about text, not
Yeah,
images.
and it's more,
I mean, we should, do I have a second? I should ask for a second first, sorry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Peck. So an amendment was made by Dr. Kercher. The amendment is to strike number 1 under restriction by grade and age, and we have a second by Ms. Peck. And now we'll open it up for discussion about that.
I just think we're opening ourselves up to where we were a few months ago. We're going backwards again.
So this,
Somebody's idea is different from somebody else's. And so,
How
Right.
did this come about? I mean,
yeah.
so this is from when we made our statement in September. We said that we understood that some text, over descriptive text, may need to be restricted in our school library. So that was about words, where the number 6 is about pictures and images. Number 1 under restriction is where that came from. So when I was speaking with the attorney, and she said, well, we don't have anything in here that actually allows us to restrict anything. We say we can restrict it, but what is the guideline to allow the staff to restrict something? So this allows that section there, if we decide to keep or not keep. That section it's about words, specifically text.
Okay, so obscene material, text without images. The book says the couple were out copulating behind the barn. Ooh, that's depicting a sex act.
Right.
So
So this also
that
will
would be
be,
restricted. We wouldn't have access to that book unless you're.
I think what this is
21.
suggesting is that it's not, okay, I just heard the end of your sentence. So what I read here is that it wouldn't be taken out of the library necessarily, but there would be restriction relative to age.
Doesn't say that.
Well, just restriction by grade or age.
What grade or what age?
Right. I think that's, again, a procedural matter.
it would be we allow.
No, that's a policy matter.
Well, we allow, just kind of like the previous conversation, we allow staff to make decisions frequently about. So this would also, that's how that would, when I was talking with the attorney, that's how that, some board members had expressed that when some of those books that did not have images were read to us, some of the board members expressed that maybe that was not content we wanted to be in the hands of children, and how could we manage that? Maybe some of that should be restricted by grade and age, and this is how that piece was developed.
The definition isn't just if it's in there, it's restricted. It has a standard that talks about the average person taking the material as a whole and applying contemporary community standards as to what is suitable material for minors, which I think is a key because, you know, I agree that when you start restricting books or taking books off the shelves, you are on a slippery slope, but we're also a school. We're not a public library. We're a public school library. So that suitable for minors is it's an important phrase. And then it has to appeal to the prurient interest and it's patently offensive, which means without doubt. It's without doubt offensive. And taken as a whole, it lacks serious literary, scientific, political, or artistic value. It's basically saying, why is this book in our library? It's so bad that why is this here for our kids to read? The way I read that. Now, I get it. It's gray. It depends on who's reviewing and what their standard is, and maybe that's enough to strike it from the policy, but the way I read that, that's saying there are certain books that we shouldn't have in a library for kids, right?
My opposition comes from at what grade and what age. It's not stated if it's going to be policy, then that should be in the policy. We're going to tie the hands of our librarians and
Yes.
classroom teachers. That's what we're headed toward.
What do 1 and 3 differ? I mean, why, is there a need for having both of them? Could one of them be sufficient? I mean, I don't know.
So, number 1 is material describing sex acts, sex acts, sexualized nudity, masturbation, excretory functions, and sadomastic abuse. So that, I mean, you could have pervasive vulgar language that is not describing sex acts and those kind of things.
And so did you run this by MSBA attorneys?
This is no, this is our school attorney. This will, if we approve it, it'll go to MSBA. This is through the school attorney. Any of you guys could have reached out to any, yeah. I did reach out to our school attorney. And I think if we're going to ask Dr. Robinson to look at restricting books, we're going to have to give him some parameters to restrict books. If we don't give him parameters to restrict books, then we didn't have anything in here that gives him the opportunity to restrict books. So it's at the pleasure of the board to decide what we want for our, you know, how we want to provide that to our students. I don't think it's wrong for the board as leadership of the district to look at the content and say, as we're evaluating content and listening to words, that we need to be responsible to students of what we provide them access to. And so I think if we can come up with a way to define that restriction by grade age better, that would help resolve that.
What I see here, if I could, is by not giving a grade and an age, there's different levels of restriction. Some of the material that we've heard and that we're aware of might meet a standard that someone under 18 shouldn't have access to it. Other materials might meet a standard that would say someone under the age of 12 shouldn't have access to it. So I don't know that we can say this is the age.
Other discussion around Dr. Kercher's motion.
Having heard the discussion, I'll withdraw my amendment. but you have to get the seconder to withdraw the second, since there's been discussion.
Second.
You withdraw your, okay. Are there other, so Dr. Kercher has withdrawn his amendment, and Ms. Peck has withdrawn her second to his amendment. Is there other amendments or discussion? We're back now to the original amended proposal.
Well, even though we are required to follow state law anyway, I think it doesn't hurt to amend the policy at the top part
Okay.
for selection to add number 8, which would be provide materials not in violation of Missouri State Statute 573.550. Just to be clear.
In the original adoption of materials.
Yeah,
Right.
to say we're not bringing it in the first place.
I would be in support of that.
Which I think we're not allowed to anyway, but,
Right.
you know,
It just further,
drives it home, yeah.
So would you read your amendment one more time? Are you making a motion?
Motion to amend to add, under objectives for the selection of library materials, number 8, provide materials not in violation of Missouri State Statute 573.550.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Demir. Do I have discussion surrounding that?
So do we want to limit it that way, Andy, or do we want to just say it would be in violation of state statute
State law, state or federal law.
and federal? Because we didn't have
State
until
federal
August
law.
of 22, 55,
True, if they change the statute number.
75, so.
Yeah.
So if we just said that would be in violation of state or federal statute.
which in effect is a restatement of what's already in policy, but so much of policy is a restatement. So I would be in favor of that.
So provide materials not in violation of state or federal.
We could also state, this is how I had thought about this in my mind. I had written materials are compliant with state and federal law. All the other ones are
If you put it
positive.
under number 7.
Number 7.
As
and we
another
could do
bullet
it either
point.
way. Yeah.
Number 7 on
Objectives for selection of library materials.
There's already 5 little bullet points under 7 if you added that as a 6th.
Under number 7 as a sub-bullet. Okay.
Because it's like the other ones are materials should have permanent and timely values, information should be accurate, materials should be presented in a clear manner, materials should be authoritative, materials should have significance, and then we could add another bullet, material is compliant with state and federal law.
Is that, and I'm out, the way I read that is it's number 7, it's talking about films, I mean, it specifically is films, CDs, tapes, I guess it says and books. Okay.
And we can add,
all
we can
kinds
do
of
it either way.
material.
I think
Yeah.
that would be very,
Yeah.
you're the one that has made the
I was
motion,
thinking out
so,
loud.
yeah.
Okay, so
So for clarification.
for clarification, motion to amend to add sub-bullet point to 7, that is, requires to provide materials in compliance with state and federal law.
And do you still have your second
Yes.
for that, the way we work? Gotcha. Any other discussion surrounding that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of that amendment, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. Seeing none, that amendment
That's
passes.
a win.
So now we're back to the original motion on the table with 2 amendments attached to it. The first amendment with the last paragraph and the second amendment to the updating the objectives for selection of library materials. Do I have any other conversation or discussion regarding the proposed draft?
So the third to last paragraph assumes the form will restrict materials, but if we allow for restriction by greater age, I think we need to amend that to say, the second sentence, say parents or guardians may complete the appropriate form to restrict or allow materials at any time, and such instructions will be reported to.
Because that's how the form reads.
Well, if we're going to vote for restriction by age, and we approve that, then we can have restricted materials that I, as a parent, say, my kids should be able to read that, but my kid's not old enough or not in the right grade, so I want to provide my kid the ability to
I
check
see.
that out.
Yes.
So allowing it to go both ways, to say if we're gonna restrict it, we're also giving the parent the ability to say, no, you can read that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that last, third to last paragraph, motion to amend to say, the district shall provide parents, guardians with the option and a method to restrict or allow specific material for their individual students. Parent guardians may complete the appropriate form to restrict or allow materials at any time, and such instructions will be reported to and implemented by district library media center staff members.
So we add or allow, where?
2 times allow, right after the word restrict,
After the words
on
restrict.
the first line and the second line, restrict appears, and then change the word restrictions to instructions be reported.
And such instructions.
And such instructions, okay. So, Ms. Lockridge, are you making that as a
Yes.
motion? So she's making, and I'll have you read that one more time, if you
Okay.
don't mind.
Motion to amend the third to last paragraph. The district shall provide parents, guardians with the option and a method to restrict or allow specific material for their individual students. Parents, guardians may complete the appropriate form to restrict or allow materials at any time, and such instructions will be reported to and implemented by district library media center staff members.
Do I have a second to,
Second.
second by Dr. Kercher? Now, we're open for discussion on this third amendment.
No, just a comment that I like that you give the parents the rights to, if they have a child that they allow a book that is restricted, it's allowing parents the opportunity to decide whether or not their child is mature enough to read material that otherwise was restricted. So I do like that. That's a good catch.
I like that as well. I think that also kind of helps
Yeah.
empower the parents back again. It gives Dr. Robinson the option and the staff the option to restrict, but it also allows parents to say, I'm okay. They can have access to the entire library. So, yeah. And that form, they could fill the form out and that can be part of their child.
I mean, some of them are already doing that, so.
Right, so that formalizes that
Yep.
process, so. Any other discussion about the third amendment?
Just going back to one of our speakers, Ms. Beasley, when she was talking about some of those books are on AP courses. So if we did that and say, and this, I'm just thinking out loud, if there was a book that had a greater age restriction that was on a reading list for one of those courses, then the teacher could encourage parents to, if this passes, then the parents would have to then go and
Authorize it.
submit this form that their student is allowed to read this book for this AP class.
Can I ask a question of Mrs. Beasley? Forgive me, Ms. Beasley. On the AP books that you spoke of, are there typically options?
Yes.
Okay, so there might be options that would not be restricted by,
Yes, but if we start restricting books and the AP board books into it, they might not like that we're starting to restrict any of the books that are on the list.
restricting with respect to age or,
I don't know, it doesn't say.
yeah, Mrs. Dickkut?
As someone who's helped students study and looked at in other school districts, the AP courses in great detail, they're pretty strongly held within their reading list that if your school district won't support the reading of it, they will potentially pull your AP class, even though there's options. And kids also can't be successful on the test because each question gives you about 3 material options. So if you don't have a broad reading base, you won't be successful. That's part of the reason that they do it.
Would they restrict, if a student signed up for an
Well, they
AP?
might pull it from the Cameron R-1 school district and not allow the class to be taught. Or
I'm
allow
asking
this- oh,
if
okay.
a student who decides, I want to take AP, the parent is made aware, in order to take AP, you need to sign off on all these books. Would that be a flag for AP? Is that what you're saying as well? Or would this just be an understanding between parents of students taking an AP course that?
I don't know, I don't speak for the AP board.
No, I know, I
You
just.
might know.
You have-
I taught AP history, and so what they do is, at least every 2 years, or maybe every year if they choose to, the school has to provide almost, it's kind of like a syllabus,
Mhm.
but it's much more entailed than any syllabus anybody in here has seen in a college course, in which everything is coded, and you also have to provide a complete list of resources that you have available to them. And then they look at how you've got your course structured, and every school can structure it somewhat differently, but they all have to meet like the same base criteria. They'll look at each unit, how it's coded, if it's addressing enough of the criteria, and they have like a whole list of criteria that has to be met, and some of those are repetitive from unit to unit, because it kind of builds on itself, if that, it kind of scaffolds a little bit.
Mhm.
And then look at all your resources.
Mhm.
And if your school would not meet the acceptable standards for resources that are available,
Mhm.
my understanding what would happen is they wouldn't just automatically strike you, they would say, okay, how are we going to address this first? And if you refuse to address it, then I imagine they would have a prerogative to strike it. I know just from that, this has happened in other states within the last few years where school districts and even entire states have been like confronted by AP, and generally I've yet to read one where they just struck it down, but there have been concerns raised that I'm aware of. And it's mostly with the AP history, because that's what I taught, but that's kind of how AP history is structured.
Dr. Robinson, I know our AP courses are a big part of, actually it saves a lot of our kids a lot of money as they go to college. What are your thoughts regarding, do you feel like there could be a potential for endangering that program, or?
I don't think there's that potential, no. We do have a lot of dual credit classes, but those are not all AP classes.
Okay.
We do offer probably 90% of our classes are dual credit compared to AP. We have very few AP courses, so.
For the community, kind of explain, just so that people, because it is an acronym, AP, kind of, can you
Yeah.
explain?
So it just means advanced placement, and what it is it's pretty intense. I mean, it's a very intense workload for the students and the teacher as well. And what it allows you to do is you take a test at the end of the semester. It's generally early May when you take it. Other history ones like around May 5th or thereabouts. And you take the test, and you have to score at a certain level to have the opportunity to get college credit. And that can also vary from university to university. I know universities have been raising the bar a little bit because they like that tuition money as well.